Okay, so about yesterday.
About last night.
About last night. I feel like I need to provide a little bit of context for this quick story I'm about to share because Gina and I experienced what I can only label as a very esoteric session. Like, really out there. We're very open-minded though, so we were like, let's just give it a go. And so we were doing a virtual healing session, and obviously we had to close our eyes. And so eyes are closed. We're kind of doing this meditative thing, but I want to know what the practitioner is doing. So I open my eyes. I squint them open. I'm Asian, so they probably couldn't tell. I squint them open, and I see what's going on the screen, and I'm like, what the fuck? Gina never saw it though.
No, I was pretty committed to doing it.
To the healing.
And I knew that if I did open my eyes, like I kept on wanting to.
Yes.
But I resisted the temptation.
So the reason why we engage in this very esoteric session, I'm not going to talk about it because I'm not going to necessarily name what it was because I don't want the practitioner or whatever to feel like, oh, that we're talking crap. We're not. We were really open-minded to it. But we wanted to really practice and play around with this idea that because of quantum entanglement and like all energy being connected, like can we get virtual healing, right? Because people have heard about this that, oh, even if you're not there, even if it's over the phone, like you can experience it. And I never done anything like that. So I was like, let's just like see. But after we opened our eyes and they were asking us, well, how did that feel? And I was really honest. I was like, I just felt like I did a meditation.
Yeah. I mean, I did feel something, but it's hard to know if it wasn't just from being in a meditative state. Right. So, when I do meditations and even with my clients, it's a very somatic experience. And so I was really attuning to what my body wanted to do. And I did feel kind of a pulling to the right. I felt like a pulling upwards. And I did have a bit of a headache before. And then the headache did start to dissipate. But again,
you closed your eyes though.
Exactly.
So you got to do a little eye rest.
And I did meditate. I did go into a calmer nervous system state. And so it's hard to know what that was from exactly, but
yeah, I'm like a really woo-woo person too, right? Like I'm open to anything, and that's why I wanted to try it.
Yeah,
but I really felt like it was a little bit of hogwash, a little bit. Like I'm really open to all of the laws of the universe, the laws of physics, and like I understand that they are working in unconscious ways that we can't see, but I really felt like, yeah, we just got an opportunity to sit in meditation, which we didn't need to have a session for.
I just like love that you called it hogwash. I mean, I remember we went in person somewhere at one time, and it's just like so funny because I know Sam's faces, right? Like I just know what you're thinking, and you get pretty squinty. You kind of like move your lips around. I
need Botox
bit.
like right here because I do.
Because you're like you kind of lean in a little bit with like one ear where you're like, and then you're like, You do a little bit of like the
I literally
nod.
put the chin on the hand, and I'm like,
with a bit of a squint. But we did this in-person thing once, and I just remember we both kept oscillating between, is this person legit or are they making this up? Do you remember?
Right.
And in the end, I was like, I don't know. I think she was kind of legit because she ended up saying some stuff that we felt like we really resonated with. But I think really the purpose in sharing this is, as always, it's always up to your discernment.
Yes.
Right? Feel into your truth. And I think, for some person, this could have been the most impactful, profound healing.
Totally.
For us, it was not. And that's okay. It doesn't make it wrong. And I think we get to really decide for ourselves what works for us.
Yeah, I mean, some people don't even like physical massages.
It's true.
They're like, I feel worse after those. So you know what? Take it or leave it. But I think that some people hear maybe our podcast or different resources and they think like, oh my gosh, I need to try like all of these different spiritual healing modalities. And like, I'm somehow limited or, behind if I don't experience them. But I really want to offer my truth right now, which is that a lot of it is honestly BS. So, take what works and leave what doesn't. There are certain practices that I do engage with that I think are wildly helpful. I mean, we do a lot of sound healing.
Yeah.
But I feel like I can really get behind that because I'm literally feeling the vibrations like hitting my eardrums. They're affecting the cells in my body. Like your body's made of water, so your body's literally vibrating. But yeah, I mean, I've heard this for so long that you can heal energetically from remote distances and things like that. And I'm not even saying that you can't.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's just that I tried to open myself up to it. We had someone on Zoom and we were a little bit like, what's going on?
Yeah,
we were like, what just happened?
I think we just didn't know what to expect. Was probably,
but that was good. We went in with an open mind.
Totally. Like I've had healing sessions over Zoom personally, and they were quite powerful. But equally, I've had healing sessions over Zoom where I didn't feel anything. I've tried Reiki before, where I was like, oh my gosh, like my whole body just felt different. And then I've had Reiki sessions where I felt literally nothing.
Yeah.
And so I think it really depends. Like one of the things that I teach my clients, and we actually taught inside of the Unmarried Self, is like about elemental energies. And I remember when my coach taught this to me, and we were dealing with the element of fire, and I literally felt super hot inside. Like I was like sweating, and I could feel that energy through, I guess, this Zoom, interaction.
Right.
But I wouldn't have believed that would have been possible until I experienced it.
Right, but that's you causing it. That's you thinking of fire.
True.
Right? Whereas
Yes.
like the remote healing is kind of like, ooh, like me over here in another country is going to produce an effect. But I don't really believe in that. I believe we produce our own effects.
Totally.
So when you were doing the elemental meditation, you were conjuring the image and like the sounds and energy of fire and, feeling that within the pit of your belly or whatever. But yeah, I mean, we've been open to so many different things, and I've gone to see psychics. I've done Reiki too. Maybe we need to have a Reiki practitioner on because
that'd be really cool.
I'm a little skeptical about Reiki.
I mean, I remember the first time someone did Reiki on me, and I did open my eyes, and I was like, "What the hell are you doing?" Because I was lying there, and I was like, "Is anything even happening?"
Right.
Because I'm like, is she even in here? Like, I was like,
they just close the door and
has
leave.
It started? And like, when will I know when it's over? Like, I just didn't know what to expect. And then when I opened up my eyes and I saw her kind of, moving around, then I was like, okay, she is in here. And like I said, I've had sessions where I felt like literally nothing, and others that I have felt profound change inside of me. And yeah, I guess when it comes to the whole fire thing, even my coach was emitting that fire energy, and then I felt it, but like you're right that I'm really cultivating it inside of me.
Right.
So I think it also just depends on what state you're in. Maybe our state was not as open yesterday, but I feel like we went into it pretty open. Either way.
Totally.
It doesn't matter.
Right. But I think like with reference to what you're saying, think of how Reiki practitioners, when they get Reiki, they report the highest impact and effects because maybe they're aware of the mechanism. They have like a deep-seated belief about the work, and so they leave the session and they're like, wow, like I feel so clear. But, for me to go in with an open mind but not really an understanding of what's happening, I just kind of leave after closing my eyes for a bit.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not speaking against it. If it works for you, keep using it, right? But yeah, I just thought I would share that little story.
Yeah, but just don't be influenced because it worked for somebody else, and so you think it has to work for you in that way.
Yes.
And even with like even yoga, right? Like, I mean, some people go into a yoga session and they feel this immense change inside of them, and then other people go and they're like, that was really hard, and all I could feel was physical pain. And so it's really just going to be dependent on you and the state that you're in, and ultimately what you believe helps you. So, as we always say, everything in the correct dosage for you, and sometimes the dosage is none.
Totally. I love that you said that. But okay, this conversation is not about every single esoteric healing session we've ever had.
Yes.
We'd have to talk for 5 hours about all of that. But we actually received a series of questions that we've been compiling for probably months now.
Yeah.
We have a page, a Google form, if you will, in the Spiraling Higher Free community where we ask people to bring their questions, ask us about us or the podcast or guests or anything like that. And so finally we compiled, how many here? 13.
13 of them.
13 decent length questions about the origins of this podcast, a little bit about us. And yeah, Gina was craving a JFF episode.
A Just for Fun app. Yeah, I was really missing you. I was telling you today, I saw her 7 days ago. But it just feels like it's been such a long time because we haven't been talking as much this past week because we've just been both busy. I've had a lot going on too. So I wanted to do something a little light and fun and for our community. And we've been really dying to answer these questions. So question number 1. what inspired you to start this podcast? I'm so curious to know what your answer is going to be.
Don't you know what my answer
I do,
is?
but I want to hear the way you're going to say it today.
Okay, well, what inspired this podcast was obviously me and Gina's joint healing journey. It felt like when Gina entered my life, things just like took off and accelerated. Like every wound I'd ever obscured, every sort of like weird relational pattern, like everything just came to the surface, but in a really amazing way, not in like a, oh my God, I'm suffering through the dark night of the soul. Like it was amazing because you were such clarity for me, and I think I was for you. And so, I mean, for the first, I guess, 2 years of our relationship, 3 years, we probably banked. I honestly, I would love to know, like, if the AI gods could know for us, like, how many hours we talked about healing our patterns, like somatic stuff, like how many hours we actually talked, and how many times we left those conversations feeling like floating, like lighter versions of ourselves, more purposeful, more connected. And then I'll never forget, it was March of
2022.
Okay, yeah, it was March of 2022. And we were like on one that night. I don't know what was going on. We'd already been talking for an hour and a half. And I was like, fuck, I should have been recording this conversation.
Yeah.
There's so many nuggets. So then I just started recording it without Gina's consent or knowledge. And then we actually ended up talking for an additional 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
Like it was a 4-hour phone call.
Yeah.
And you said at the end of that conversation, man, I really wish we were recording this.
Yeah.
And then I said, I started recording like 2 hours ago. You were like, what? Really? And then that inspired me to say, but what if we recorded all of our conversations?
Yeah.
And initially it was just going to be for us. We weren't like for the world to hear. We were just like, what if we just literally recorded all of our conversations so that we could go back and, you know, reflect on the journey, almost like a digital diary of sorts. And then that sort of evolved into podcast.
Yeah, I actually downloaded an app. I think it's called like Tape a Call. And I paid for the subscription so that we could, like, it was a separate phone number. So I was like, call me on this number from now on so it can record all of our conversations. And we had talked about podcasting just over the years. I think we always knew we were going to do something together. And then I think also with you launching like your TikTok and all of that, people were also asking you for a podcast. And so like, I think it just was kind of the time for us to start doing it because I don't know. I think all of the components outside of us and inside of us, I think just transpired to feel like it was the right time. And we actually felt like this is what we would want to talk about. And I won't say I felt ready, but I was.
I love that. We were always ready, but we will not always feel ready.
Yep.
And I would say that prior to 2022, like you said, we did talk about it, but we just genuinely weren't ready because we would have quit so fast. Like we would have quit so fast because we hadn't really dealt with a lot of the like worthiness stuff that was still kind of buried deep because in order to create relatively consistency, you do need to believe in the value of yourself. And your own perspectives and insights and journey. And so we got to a place where we were like, man, I've like been through shit. And I know how to speak on it. Like I was talking yesterday on my Instagram about the addiction of overdoing. And people were like, wow, this is so clear. Like I never heard it this way and I understand it so deeply. And I thought, yeah, because I fucking went through it. Like I just can't even talk about things that I haven't been through, at least without talking out of my ass. So like I try my best to actually share what I've been through honestly, but that's what made us feel quote unquote ready or made us ready was that we actually began to value our own experiences.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. And I think it was just really experiencing how much we were healing from hearing each other's stories. And we were like, I think this might be helpful for other people. And we also ultimately wanted to talk to more people who were on this journey too. So we were like, let's expand the circle.
Exactly.
And that's really what inspired us. And it happened pretty quickly. We had that conversation in March. I think we had recorded a couple of our conversations. And then we bought mics in April and then released our podcast in June. So
wow, that is crazy.
It's pretty fast. Like we recorded 6 episodes and then it just happens. So again, like there's multiple inspirations. I think personally for me, what inspired me was to really honor this internal desire that I've had for so long. When I was a kid, I really wanted like a radio show. And I have also just really always wanted to create something with you and, you know, to be able to do it in this way where we're literally just talking, which we would do anyway. Like Sam and I have had, I think our longest conversation might be 8 or 9 hours.
Well, what about when we're like on vacation? I guess it's the whole day is a conversation.
The whole day.
We don't stop.
We don't stop. We talk the whole time. And there was even one time where Sam was on a plane and we were on Voxer.
Right.
And I was just talking.
And I was texting.
She was just texting me back and I was like cleaning my house. And I would think that was like an 8-hour flight. And I was like, wow, I can't believe you're not bored of like listening to me
You
talk.
were cleaning your closet and you were like, I don't know if you can hear me right now. And I was like, I hear you just fine. It was like I was like an AI robot like responding. Because I couldn't send my lifetime voice messages because people were beside me.
Yeah.
But I just was responding live, just texting on this airplane, which is crazy. Technology is wild.
It's wild. I was like, I can't believe you're like in the air right now while I'm cleaning my closet and we're communicating. So for us, I think personally, we were inspired to record our conversations, but on a collective level, we wanted to just talk to more of you. So that's what inspired that. How do you choose the topics for each episode?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of talked about this a little bit in episode 76 because we talked about the most common limiting beliefs we hear from our clients, but we're coaching every day. Like I have a coaching call at least every other day, and I feel that those are one of my biggest inspirations for what we want to talk about.
Same.
Obviously, what we're spiraling through is a huge one. It's obvious. It's usually linked though to what my clients are going through. It's always like collectively.
It's always the same.
Yeah, it's like very similar themes. But then in terms of our guests, we do have some guiding questions when we ask them to come on. We talk about, you know, what do you want to either normalize or illuminate on the healing journey or the soul's journey. And what is your intention for the collective? And I feel that most people who come onto the podcast have a pretty clear idea of what that is.
Yeah, and I think we always have an intention for every episode of, you know, one of the questions we actually ask is, how will we know when we're done the episode? And so usually for us, that's, you know, these specific things that we want to impart or have people leave with. But also a lot of them, a lot of them are pretty not planned in a lot of ways. In the sense of just, we kind of have, like you said, an overarching theme and then we just kind of share. And so, I would say the easiest way to answer how we choose the topics is what's alive for us in that moment and what have we been going through. And I think for both of us, we're very open about the things that we go through. However, at the same time, there are some things that we have to have time to process first. And then when we feel ready to kind of share, that's when we'll kind of bring it up. So
I think the reason why the conversations, well, I'm making an assumption, but why you enjoy listening to them is because they're oftentimes so fresh.
Yeah.
There obviously are things that we need to process, but we're usually pretty organically moving through life. And then we come to the podcast studio and we're like, oh, this thing that I was just talking to you about yesterday.
Yeah.
We try actually not to control topics or guests too much.
Yes.
Yeah, because even like what guests we feel inspired to talk to is really dependent on what we're moving through at that time, right? Like sometimes we do get guest suggestions that don't really feel aligned for us at the time. Like, we had a woman who wanted to talk about fasting and I was like, I'm like kind of not into fasting right now.
Yeah.
So I mean, sure, I could have invited her on and we could have had like, you know, a rhetorical jousting situation where I'm like, I don't know, right? But I really feel like every episode reflects so authentically where we are on the journey.
Yeah.
And that's the topics.
I couldn't agree more. Because even when I was dealing with grief, we had that grief person come on.
Yeah.
And, you know, to all of the parents out there, I want you to know we are definitely wanting to bring on more parenting people.
We are.
I know. And I want even more, though, because I think especially with my daughter turning, she's 9.5 now. It's just a totally different landscape of parenting that I don't think I'm fully prepared for. So I definitely want to bring even more parenting people on because that's something I talk about, honestly, probably in all of my conversations and all of my coaching calls because, you know, children are such an easy way for us to be able to personify like what we're going through and the way that we treat ourselves. And so I often lean on stories about my daughter. So that's just another example of how we find guests and topics. I feel like that answers that question. Next question. Ooh, can you share a memorable moment or story from one of your episodes?
Yes, we can. We can.
That's the answer. What do you have?
I mean, I think for me, most memorable are the ones where I clearly feel a somatic difference at some point during the recording. I think the first one that comes to mind for sure is Kyle Cease. He was episode 11 of the podcast, which is crazy because we weren't shit when we started. And he was like, sure, I'll come on. And I was like, you will?
Are you sure?
He's incredible. He is one of
him.
my most treasured, loved mentors at one point, but
Same.
also just like guides on this journey. We love him. So he came on and he talked about the wound of conditional love.
Yes.
And yeah, there was a part where I remember I was just moved to tears a little bit. And he was like, oh, Sam, I can see that that's impacting you. And I was like, I'm impacted. That's for sure. He speaks with such truth, like everything he says.
And he's just so funny. He
was a comedian.
I know. That's what I mean. That's what I love about it is that he has such a depth, but it's so light. It's so palatable and just so easy to listen to. And even his books are so just so him. He's not trying to sound smart. He's just super real. And so I would agree that that was probably one of my favorite episodes. I think another memorable moment for me was when Ocean was on and she did the Sinistry reading.
Oh my God. Yeah. That was the first episode with a guest.
Was it?
Yeah, episode 5.
Oh my.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
yeah, we love Ocean.
We love Ocean.
We've worked closely with her inside of our programs.
Yeah.
I just did a session with her back in March, I think.
Yeah,
maybe
I did
April.
mine in like April or something, or February. So she continues to be somebody that I go to for guidance. But I think just seeing, and we continue to look at our astrological compatibility, and I'm always just blown away. But she was really the first time we've seen how synchronistic our charts are. And I thought that was really, really exciting to see.
Another one for me was definitely Christopher Lee Maher.
Yes,
which
I was going to say him next too.
Yeah, I think he's episode 66, maybe.
Yeah, you're way better at remembering the numbers.
I could be totally wrong, but I think it's 60 something. And I think that episode was a great example of me totally underestimating someone. And I was like blown away because I just kind of went into the episode like, all right, let's talk. Like your story's interesting. Like, but a lot of it I read in the bio. So I was like, okay, like he just gets a chance to verbalize it now, even though I've already read it. But no, he had so much more to say than his bio could account for. And I really felt his grounded presence and truth. Like in every single uttered syllable he said, I could hear the resonance of truth. I could hear the resonance of safety. Like he is someone who is deeply in his body and embodies his work.
I couldn't agree more. We were like on the edge of our seats of every word he was saying.
Yeah.
I felt really moved by him too. I feel like I always like Lorianne came on our episode or onto our podcast
I was gonna
twice.
say her too.
Yeah, I just feel like her energy is so grounding. So I really enjoyed that one. I mean, obviously we enjoy all of our episodes, but most memorable moments.
Well, I started crying in the part 2 for Lorianne because we talked about complex trauma.
Yeah.
And it's not that I didn't know this intellectually, but I felt it so deeply in my body that how you turn out as an adult is really not your fault.
Yeah.
And it broke my heart because I was like, oh my God, you don't even start with like a blank slate when you're a baby.
No.
Like think about it. You're not born in a vacuum. Like you are a human made from other humans. And what those humans experienced have an effect on you, whether you know what that is consciously or unconsciously. And I just kind of felt like, oh my God, like I started off like in scarcity. No wonder. Like, no wonder there was so much for me to work through to get to where I am.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of us are born through fear.
Yes.
And I actually just talked to one of my clients who just left me a voice note talking about these memories she's having about her mom and things that her mom has shared with her about her beliefs with her work and what she's, able to accomplish in her life, just how she was very much told what to do. And so my client was realizing, oh my gosh, like no wonder, like I constantly feel like I have to be told what to do or question myself. And it's like, yeah, like it just makes sense. We literally are made up of the same DNA. And that was such a powerful episode to, I guess have more compassion for ourselves instead of asking what's wrong with me and why am I like this. to just be more internally supportive and more loving. And I think that's always going to be a better breeding ground for healing. So,
yeah. There's actually someone I want on the podcast so bad. You know who it is, Hillary McBride.
She really want her on.
She wrote The Wisdom of the Body,
Yes.
and she lives here in Vancouver. If anyone knows her, please connect us,
tell her to
I've already emailed and messaged. But she wrote in her book about how she dealt with these insane like allergies for the longest time. Like she was allergic to everything, like air, grass.
That's me.
And then guess what? She learned, and maybe this will resonate with you, but she learned that when she was in the womb, her mom lost her sister. And it impacted her mom's nervous system and therefore hers so deeply. Her mom was moving through so much grief and sadness and anger. And so what she realized through her research was that like all those receptors that are there to perceive threat were just like amplified because the womb became a threatening place, literally. Mm-hmm. And so then she's born and she's allergic to literally everything because those receptors are there's such an abundance of them. And so when she recognized this and saw everything through that lens, it just made her feel so much more compassionate, like for her little body that was so scared of all of these allergens. Because obviously consciously you're like, why am I allergic to grass?
Yeah.
But it's like your body is just trying to protect itself from all of these threats because its very first experience of being a being on earth was danger and sadness and grief and just like all of these really harmful energies, right? So, God, I would love to talk to her more about that.
I really want her on.
That's a future memory.
Yes. And another person I want to have on is Sarah Blondin. She's actually also technically local. I know she used to live in Vancouver, but she lives somewhere else in this province now. But she is one of the favorite meditation teacher that I have. And so shout out to Sarah Blondin. If anybody knows her, please bring her on.
Please, please.
Okay, number 4. What has been the most challenging part of producing this podcast? I feel like there's a few things that have been challenging. Being it with you. Just kidding. Just how much I don't like you. Okay, I think we can look at it through the lens of actually doing the podcast, right? I think there's a lot of moving parts, right? So we have a lot of people asking us, how did you get started and what happened? Like, so for me and Sam, we've shared this story before. We literally recorded the first episode, and after we were done, we're like, what the hell do we do now?
Literally.
We had no idea, like, do we edit this? Where do we put it? How do you get it on Spotify?
Where do we put it?
Like, literally, where do we put it? Like, how do we save this, and how do we put it out into the ether? And so in the beginning, it was very much figuring it out as we went. And so I think also as we grow in this podcast, as we expand, our reach, as we expand our offerings, I think that inherently does bring up challenges because as I always say, like every quote unquote business problem is a personal problem. So as we have grown, I think it's triggered different things in both of us at different points in time. But yeah, from a kind of practical standpoint of the podcast itself, I would say just all the moving parts of how to actually get it out and figure those things out as you go. But then I feel like there's a lot of personal challenges too.
Yeah, so there's the technical, and then of course there's the personal sort of unconscious wounding aspect, which is obviously we talked a little bit about this before in this episode, but how this challenges your sense of worthiness and value. A lot of people who are in this position to be more creative feel a little bit like, why me? Like, why is anyone going to listen? So you need to really work through that and completely divorce your attachment to anyone needing to listen or anyone thinking that it's good, because I can honestly say we would not be able to produce this podcast if Gina and I didn't get value out of just creating the podcast. Like if we needed the outcome to be that people thought it was a good podcast or that it ranked really high, then we would have fallen apart so many different times, because we have definitely released episodes where we were like, what did we say in that? Like, was that good? But then when we come back to our decision criteria, it's, did I feel like myself and did I enjoy myself while I was creating it?
Yeah. And is it honest?
Is it honest? Is it authentic and vulnerable? And most of the criteria gets a plus, like an A+, like check. We're like, okay. So this idea of like, is it good? Is it bad? We've kind of discarded that. And we definitely decide whether or not it feels aligned for us and then just let the world decide. But because we're not attached to what the world decides, we can continue to release.
Yeah.
And so I would say for me, that hasn't been as much of a challenge because I feel like I work through a lot of that prior to starting it. But I mean, you had obviously your own personal challenge of showing up every day for a while.
Yeah, and like listening to my own voice.
Which is the best voice ever, guys. Gina has the best voice ever.
It is so crazy. I just talked to my client the other day because she had said, "Oh my gosh, your voice is so soothing," and I was like, It's so weird to hear people say that.
I'm definitely the more annoying voice on this podcast. Everyone knows it.
I strongly disagree, but we're going to disagree to disagree. But I think, for me personally, the most challenging part was, believing that my story mattered, getting over the fear of being seen, really being able to be with my inner critic because she's always online. So honestly, I think that this was such a catalyst for healing these very, very deep-seated wounds inside of me. So, shadow work can be a bitch sometimes, but also so rewarding. I think what else has been the most challenging part?
I'll say the final challenge, which is the challenge of growing any business. It's knowing when to invest in yourself. Because every business gets to that point where you're like, okay, this is a good level that we're at, but do we want to continue to grow and scale?
Yeah.
And if so, what is that going to require of me, both energetically and financially? And am I willing to trust myself within that space where it's like I've invested, but I have to wait for results?
Yeah.
And that can be really hard for anyone, depending on whether it's a podcast or any sort of personal business. But for the podcast, for example, investing in the studio was like a quote unquote challenge because we're like, okay, that's going to cost X hundred to $1,000 more per month. Do we trust ourselves to energetically meet that requirement in order to pay ourselves back or to bring more value to other people? So yeah, you have to make those decisions as you grow. And there definitely is a huge self-trust element because there's nothing telling us that we're going to make the money before we make the money. And it's not even about making the money. It's more just do we feel compelled to even grow the podcast in this way and why? What's our purpose behind that? So because the purpose behind growing it was always more about you than it was about us, it just made sense to grow. But it's a risk initially.
Yeah, and I feel like to piggyback off of that, it's also trusting in timing. I think anytime you are growing something, especially when you love it, there is a tendency to want to rush things and try to kind of do things really quickly and get over there. And so I think we've been really good about pacing ourselves and really trusting in the evolution of this and not needing to rush anything. And the other thing I'll say, because I know we actually have a couple clients who want to start a podcast. Some people are starting them with their friends. Doing anything with someone that you love this deeply can be challenging and equally, again, rewarding. I think it's two different people. We always joke that we're married. I mean, some people do.
I was literally thinking that.
People really think that we are married. We both have husbands. We don't live together.
I wish.
I know, I wish. But I think it's hard. Sometimes there have been times where I think it could be easier to do it on your own because you don't have to double check with this other person if they're ready or if you feel like this is the right time. And sometimes we're not on the same page about things. And so it's been such a beautiful way for us to even get closer. But I could see this for certain relationships being more damaging than helpful if you aren't able to have conscious conversations. So I think any partnership, if anyone just thinks working with your friend is just fun and it'll be easy, I mean, you might be in for a bit of a rude awakening. Because again, obviously we have so much fun, but it just brings up some contrast sometimes.
Yeah, and you're going to experience the most contrast if you haven't dealt with your attachments because that's why we don't have as many conflicts because consider if this podcast was my attachment to needing love or something like that, then if you're not on the same page as me, then all of a sudden I start lashing out at you because I'm like, this is my attachment. I have to make this happen. But because we're so loose with the outcomes of this podcast, we don't really butt heads that much. But yeah, we do have conscious conversations about I have this idea and you're like, oh, I wasn't even there yet. So then we just kind of have to get each other to where we are. And I mean, we're just open to hearing each other's perspectives, which is beautiful. But
totally.
Yeah, I mean, those were some, I think, more physical and then emotional challenges, I guess, of the podcast.
Yeah.
But
number 5.
How has creating this podcast impacted your personal life?
How has creating this podcast impacted your personal life? For the better. My personal life? I mean, you are my personal life.
I know.
So, I mean, I think this is twofold. I think it's deeply impacted our relationship. I feel like we have been able to heal these inner wounds that might not have had come up unless it had the opportunity to through the pod. We had shared in our friendship episode about like the jealousy we might have experienced or the comparison or feeling like not good enough. That was certainly something that I had to spiral through myself. And so I feel like it's just brought me so much closer to you, and it's allowed me to see you and love you in a way that I don't think I could if I wasn't working with you, you know? So I feel like that's been really incredible. On the other side of that, we've met so many incredible people.
Yes. I love that the podcast is a conduit for connection.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that what starting and managing this podcast has allowed me to do has been essentially creating a merging, I guess, of personal and professional life, because I think that I was raised to think that there's your work life and then there's your personal life.
Yeah.
And you're kind of like two different versions of yourself, whereas I've really eliminated myself from that paradigm, and there's only one world that I live in where I'm always myself.
Yeah.
I'm always myself at home. I'm always myself at the studio or with you or with our guests. And so I don't feel this split or fragmentation anymore, which is what I think makes people feel so heavy in their work life, because their work life requires them to be a suppressed or limited version of themselves. Like everyone who goes to work and doesn't like their job is not really who they fully are there. Mm-hmm. They're being who they think they need to be for that purpose or for that work environment. So I completely discarded that. And now I just feel like this is my life. It doesn't feel like a separation.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it bleeds so beautifully into each other. And even just from a perspective of our own healing, like you said earlier, a lot of times when we're working with our clients, it'll really be so perfectly inwoven with something that we might be experiencing or going through. And so I think, the relationships that we've built, the things that we've witnessed in our clients, I mean, they have moved me and changed me on a cellular level that will be with me in my personal life forever. So I love how you said that. They're very much merged. So everything we do on this podcast impacts our personal life. Question number 6, how do you stay motivated and consistent with your podcast?
I know. We don't require ourselves to stay motivated and consistent with the podcast.
Exactly. That's the thing. It's that you don't need motivation for something that you inherently just are in love with. I don't feel motivated and need to be consistent to be your friend.
Exactly. There's no because there's no reward on the other side of it, I don't need motivation for it.
Exactly.
Like the process is the motivation, if you will. So that's not hard for me to do.
It's not hard to be consistent.
Yeah. And I think I just talked to my clients about this recently, but you really need to release your attachment to being consistent, because like if you think you have to be consistent, you intuitively know that you will fail to be consistent at some point. Mm-hmm. So it's actually releasing your need to be consistent that's going to allow you to like eventually develop consistency, because we've had to take breaks. We've had to we're taking a break after this one. We're going to actually release 3 throwback episodes after this podcast. So I mean, we've let that go.
Yeah. So I don't think this is the answer that a lot of people might be like looking for, but I think it's truly been the easiest thing to be consistent in, because as you said, we're not trying to be consistent.
Yeah.
We've created a project or like a labor of love, if you will, that we're just in love with. I want to show up for this.
Yeah, and I was going to say we treat it like life.
Yes.
Because we just talked about the merging of this in the personal life. And in your life, you're not really consistent with anything.
Yeah.
Like you have ebbs and flows and seasons throughout your life. And so we just treat it like that.
Yeah.
It's not something that we feel like, oh, well, that's the thing. We don't feel attached to an outcome. Therefore, why do we need to be consistent?
Totally. And there's really no pressure. I think having no pressure is what helps it to continue to feel like something we want to do. I think a lot of people put pressure on themselves to be consistent, and that applying of pressure is what creates resistance from you doing the thing consistently. Mm-hmm. And so for us, we don't have any pressure. We just show up because we literally want to be here.
Can you share any personal experiences that have influenced your podcast content?
All of them.
Yeah, I don't know who asked this question, but we love you. I mean, the entire podcast is like a large personal experience reflection.
It's all of it. All of my personal experiences influence our podcast content, like every single one. My motherhood journey, even my birth story that I shared about. I'm very open about the things that I struggle with and things that I spiral through, my wounds. We talk about our relationships super openly. Yeah, so literally our podcast is a collection of our personal experiences and what we've gone through. So
yeah, and we've been getting more, I think, honest and sharing just little quips and stories between us, like obviously just before this episode.
Yes.
And then when we talked about when we went to Tofino, our little trip, this is us.
This is us. Yeah.
Yeah, because we also want you to see, I guess, the people behind those experiences. Not that we don't share who we are behind the experiences, but
because again, the whole point of our podcast is connection. And you can't connect if you're not sharing who you are and what you're going through. So that was a very easy question to answer. What are some of your favorite podcasts to listen to? I mean, I feel like you have a lot.
Well, I used to, but to be honest, nowadays, I don't listen to any sort of self-development podcasts. Like, I just listen to podcasts for fun. So the one I've been listening to recently is called Every Single Album. And it's literally these two people, Nathan and Nora, constantly reviewing pop girl music albums. But they're like, they have a wealth of knowledge when it comes to pop music. They know like every producer. They have a huge history of musical knowledge. And so I learned so much about the music industry through them. But that's how I keep my pulse on like what's going on musically. Because you actually said to me, I listen to music that's new all the time.
That you do?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's because I'm always listening to their podcast. But yeah, I try to stay away from personal development stuff these days. It used to be all I listened to. Like I listened to School of Greatness by Lewis Howes for like every day for 3 years, literally between 2017 and 2020. I listened to Rachel Brathen, Yoga Girl, the From the Heart podcast. I think she's a beautiful person. But I actually don't listen to those anymore because I find that the conversations I have here with you or our guests feel like my podcast as well. And I want the rest of my time to just feel a little bit more leisurely.
Right, more fun. I don't really listen to podcasts. I mean, I listen to specific episodes with certain guests. So I still listen to ones that are personal development related. Like I think I went on like a Joe Dispenza binge because he's on so many. But I actually haven't listened to him in a while. Daddy Joe, as you might call him.
Daddy Joe.
Yeah, I think
Should we do our Joe Dispenza impression? Okay. If you guys know who Joe Dispenza is and you've listened to like any number of his podcast interviews, you know he has like a script. Like he talks about his work in the same melodic contour and cadence, same tone.
Same emphasis on words.
No, and we love him so much. We're not making fun of it, but
it's just funny.
At times we'll be like, well, as soon as you start really thinking about the energy of your future, well, you got to get ready because you're going to want to do it all the time. You're just going to start manifesting. You're just going to start. And like, and that's how he talks about every single one of his interviews. Yeah, but I love him.
I just love when he goes, well,
oh boy. You better get ready. You better buckle up.
You better buckle up. Yeah. We always turn on a Joe Dispenza voice sometimes when we're talking to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I do like listening to him sometimes. I think for me, like I said, I don't really listen to a lot on a regular basis, but sometimes I will seek things and I'm kind of maybe going through, like I was definitely looking for grief episodes when I was going through that. Or right now, frankly, I'm looking into a lot of like parenting content. I actually started following a bunch of like parenting teens accounts. And so, yeah, I'm more consuming content that way. But frankly, I don't really have a lot of time to listen to a lot. Like I think for me, when I'm in the car, I actually will listen to nothing just to have more presence, to be with what I'm actually doing. So yeah, I've kind of taken a bit of a break, I guess, from pods. So I guess our favorite podcast is this
Spiraling Higher. Actually, I'm so cheesy. I was listening to our podcast yesterday.
Sometimes I call you and you're like, I was just listening to us.
It just raises my vibe.
It does raise your vibe.
The point of listening to anything is to raise your vibration.
That's true.
Assuming, right? Because I remember you asked me one time, like, why do you listen to them so much? And I'm like, because it raises my vibration. The only reason why I would listen to any podcast is to learn something that's going to expand me. Yeah. And I'm like, well, I get expanded just by listening to my best friend.
I like it when one of the other episodes we had of like what inspires you, and you were like, myself.
was very Aries of me.
So Aries of you.
Okay.
Which recent episode do you feel particularly proud of?
I feel really proud of the Kate Spear episode.
Same.
Oh my God. If you guys, we just released that one.
Today.
Yeah.
That one was a powerful one. I also am really proud of the one, I don't know if it's going to be released by this time, but we interviewed each other.
Yeah, I think that one's going to come a little bit later.
Yeah, I don't know if I would use the word proud of it, but I'm really in love with that one because I just feel like it was cool to kind of go deeper into our stories.
Yeah, those are coming.
Form.
Yeah, Gina had the most brilliant idea to be the guest on our podcast, our own podcast, and really ask ourselves the questions that we often ask our guests. And it was really fun to reflect on our journey. So those will come out. Those will come out soon.
How do you suggest people start their journey towards better mental health? Listen to our podcast. Just kidding.
I was actually going to say improve your physical health.
Ooh.
Start there. Because I think trying to improve your mental health feels like a mental exercise, which is actually what you're trying to get away from. Like you have a lot of like mental, like neurotic tendencies. And I was one of those people, but I had to get out of trying to fix things with my mind because that was more mind. And I really had to drop into my body. And so this looks very simple. It's like sleeping more, eating more, drinking more water, walking more, connecting with your friends more, leisure more. Like all of these things that are going to take care of the physical body and like the heart space, if you will, those things are going to have a huge effect on your mental health because they're connected.
Completely agree. Because the state of your body is always going to impact the state of your mental health. And so I would agree with that too. And I think, to kind of expand on that a little bit more, I think it's really about getting to know your body because so much of our mental stories come from, again, what is stored in the body. And so even just getting to know when you need rest, what it feels like to be rested, what it feels like when you're full, what it feels like when you're hungry. Really even, like I remember I would have days where I would just ask myself, do I feel like I want to go for a walk? And feeling into my body to see like, what is my body saying about that? Does it need that? Or am I just doing that because I think I'm supposed to? And so, I think just really getting to know your body.
Yeah, that's a great place to start.
Yeah. Next question. What are your goals for the podcast in the next year?
Ooh. I feel like I'm always meeting my goal, so it's hard. But I think one of our shared goals is to meet more listeners.
Yeah, I actually just talked to a listener this morning, just in my DMs. I mean, sometimes like we just have these like long conversations. It's awesome. But she's actually moving from Portland to Seattle in like the next month. And so I was like, we might do an in-person meeting in Vancouver again, so she could come. I would agree. I think we just want to meet more of you in person, meet more of you online. Honestly, our goal doesn't really change. It's just for us to keep being ourselves and getting to know you.
Yeah, and helping you all by being honest through our own stories and shares.
Yeah, so that goal is never going to change.
Yeah, and I mean, our initial not goal, I guess, but why we started the podcast was because we love coaching so much, and that doesn't change either.
Yeah.
Like we want to continue to coach clients both individually and in groups because it brings me so much joy. But yeah, actually one of the things we do want to do though is start our membership, which is going to be where all of you can engage with us and come to live coaching calls like 3 or 4 times a month and meet guests and just vibe.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of putting it. Like, I think our goal is ultimately for people to experience the change and transformation and healing that we experience ourselves through the modalities that we use, which just blanket statement is coaching. We both continue to be in coaching ourselves. We continue to do the work as we spiral higher. And I just hope that more people see how accessible it is to make contact with parts of you that maybe you think are too wounded or unfixable. So that will continue to be our highest intention. Our next question is, are there any exciting upcoming episodes or guests that you can share with us?
Yes.
Actually, yeah.
Should we reveal?
Do it.
Okay, so obviously we're releasing this episode and then we're going on a mini 3-week break.
Yeah.
And then, oh my God, I'm so excited to say. Okay, so if you guys haven't been living under a rock, you've probably seen this girl on Instagram. She
on YouTube
was and technically still is a queen of online marketing and built a 7-figure business within, I don't even know how many months. She did it quickly.
Very quickly, yeah.
She's an icon, Vanessa L.
I literally feel like she's my friend.
No, we're going to have a blast. She's coming in person.
I know, because she lives where we live. And so I cannot wait to have this conversation. Like every time I watch one of her videos, like I've been consuming her stuff for years. I honestly want to say it might have even been before I met you. And just every time I'm like, I feel like we should be friends. Like I just feel like I know her, and especially just the journey that she's been on recently. I mean, we'll wait for her conversation when she comes on, but I just feel like it's going to be really resonant with our audience. So very excited about that.
We also have my very good friend and quite well-known astrologer, Colin Bedell.
Oh my God, I cannot wait to talk to him.
Yes, so if you've ever been on Instagram and searched Queer Cosmos, that's Colin. He does an incredible job of doing a lot of acting of the signs.
A lot of skits.
A lot of skits that are so unbelievably accurate. And I've met him in person several times. And whenever I've gotten a reading from him, he combines so much relational knowledge into his work. So he's read a lot about relationships. And he kind of believes in using astrology to understand relationships, whether that be the relationship to yourself or the relationship to your career, relationship to other people. And so his relational knowledge is so vast. And he's a Gemini. So he could just talk and talk and talk, and he has just a wealth of information. But I decided to ask him to talk about basically his favorite aspect of astrology. I was like, listen, everyone on our podcast has heard some basic astrological frameworks. I think if you're an astrology girly and you're here, you know your sun, moon, rising. We don't need to go over that. What parts of the chart or astrology do you feel like are not focused on enough that you nerd out about? So he's going to go off.
I'm really excited to talk to him. I really want to go over the midheaven for everybody too. So maybe that could be a follow-up episode because I feel like there's so much juiciness in midheaven.
Well, maybe he likes the midheaven.
Yeah,
and wants
maybe
to
that'll
go
be
into
the
that.
thing. I'm going to manifest that right now. Anybody else?
Yeah, fellow colleague and coach Flynn Skidmore.
I didn't know if you were going to drop that one.
Yeah.
I also can't wait to talk to him. It's going to be so good. I love his content. I just like his delivery, and I feel like it's going to be such a good conversation. He talks so much about the body as well, the somatic side of things too. So fire episodes that are coming out very, very soon.
He's such a Taurus man. I've been talking to him a lot, very intimately for like 4 months. We were working together, and he's just, I'm really excited for you all to hear from all 3 of these guests and so much more.
Yeah.
Those are just the few off the top of my head. And those will be live for you soon after our mini break. But do we have one more question?
Yeah, the final question is, how can listeners get more involved with your podcast community?
Great question. You can join the free Spiraling Higher community. That's where you're going to hear about all the real-time updates. Chat with us once a month for free. We host the monthly connection call every last Sunday of the month. But we are also very soon hosting a retreat. So the retreat is going to be in Tulum, Mexico, over on the Mayan Riviera, so the east side of Mexico. And if you've never been to Tulum, God, it feels like it's sacred land. It's sacred Mayan land. There's so much energy there. And I've been there twice now in the last 2 years, and it has been one of the most healing spaces for me to walk upon. And we're so excited to, bring the sisterhood in person. So there's going to be 10 spots for that.
Yeah, because we've only ever had retreats for the people inside of our containers. And so they've been reserved for people that have worked with us inside of our group coaching programs. And so we just decided, you know what? We want to meet more people. And so this is going to be our largest retreat thus far.
Largest retreat to date. And it's still small and intimate, right?
Yes.
Like we don't want to host like a 50-person retreat. So
Absolutely
10 spots. The first place you're going to hear about that is going to be inside of the free Spiraling Higher community. We'll give everyone who's interested an opportunity to chat with us, what their intentions are, give them some information about the retreat. And dates for that are the first weekend of November. Which I think is perfect because that's when like the weather starts to get kind of crappy.
Totally. And it's before the craziness of the holidays and all of that kind of stuff. So it'll be a really good way to kind of anchor in the end of the year and just meet some of your conscious besties. Honestly, one of the things that I'm most proud of in both of our works individually and collectively is the community that we bring together and the connections that get made at these spaces and these retreats. You know, people become these lifelong friends and pillars of support for each other. So I can't wait to see it all unravel. Because we've already been talking to a few people in the DMs about it, and they're quite excited.
Yeah. So if you hear this episode and you're like, oh my God, I have to come to this retreat, send either one of us a DM or message us within the Spiraling Higher community.
Yeah.
We'll keep tabs on you. There's already at least 3 to 4 people who are like, I'm coming.
Least. I just told one of my other clients yesterday, and so she seems pretty excited too. So she may come. And then what else? The membership, and then we also have a workshop coming up.
Yeah, we do have a workshop coming up. The workshop is going to be on August 18th from 10 a.m. until 12:30 p.m. PST.
Yes.
And it's all on perfectionism. So remember our episode 74 where we talked about perfectionism. If you want to take the work deeper, meet with us in community and talk deeply about this, have an opportunity to talk about your patterns, meet other people, and really take this information from your mind into your body. Mm-hmm. That is the intention for you. We love our workshops so much. The live component is so fun for us. We get to meet with you, chat with you. And the root of it is, or the core point and intention of this is for you to get clear on how your perfectionism shows up in your life and what patterns you can become more deeply aware of in order to shift them into more loving states of being.
Yeah, because we talk so much on this podcast about all of these concepts, but one of the things that we help our clients with is to actually embody them and live with them, not just in the mind, but actually in their life, in their bodies. And so this workshop is really designed to help all of you to actually change these perfectionistic tendencies and patterns, because we had so much feedback on that episode of people saying, yes, this all makes sense, but how do I actually change this pattern of mine? And so that is the intention. So we can't wait for that. It's coming up in August. So yeah, we have so many other things we want to do. We've told our community this many times, but we want to go on tour.
Tour bus,
totally.
Yeah, I want to go to like Seattle, LA, New York,
just all of the
Austin.
I feel like Austin's going to be pretty.
But just as a recap,
yes,
we have the retreat coming up. DM us about it because we are going to obviously have a link for that eventually. But
yes,
we're taking it day by day.
Yeah.
The thing you can sign up for once you hear this episode is the Perfectionism Workshop. There's going to be a link for that in the show notes. And then join the free Spiraling Higher community. That's also in the show notes. And if you want to ask us a question, also join the free Spiraling Higher community. There's a post in there under, I think, Pod Talk or something like that. It's one of the spaces. And we have a Google form where you can ask any question or suggest any guest, because ultimately this conversation is for you guys.
Yeah. And you can stay tuned for our membership. That's going to be coming out later this year, which we're very excited about. So lots of stuff coming up for all of you. Thank you so much for listening, for all of your messages. We get messages almost daily from you guys. And I just love connecting. So please don't be shy. Message us, come into the community, do all the things, and we will see you very soon.
We'll see you after the break. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to this honest conversation. We hope it brought you peace, clarity, and a little bit further along your spiritual journey.
If you loved this episode, it would mean the world to us if you left us a 5-star rating and a review so we can bring you more conscious conversations, spiritual topics, and guests.
And we lovingly invite you to join our free Spiraling Higher community by clicking the link in the show notes to continue this healing dialogue and share with us how this episode impacted you.
Come on in, introduce yourself, and meet your conscious besties in a safe space for healing conversations between us and other like-minded people on their healing journey.
Here's to Spiraling Higher.